Word. Good.
Welcome everybody to the Willow Glen Neighborhood Association May membership meeting. We will be covering WGNA events, upcoming events that we're going to be hosting. And then we have the Coalition of the Unhoused, which will make a presentation about using the fairgrounds for transitional housing. And then we have John Carr, who will be giving us a presentation on the use of Reid Hillview Airport and closing it. And I believe he has some information about the lead study. If you have questions for any of the speakers, please type it in the chat comments. We will have everybody muted, and then we'll read the chat and we can ask the questions after the speakers are finished. Let's see. In August, Willow Glen Neighborhood Association is going to be hosting a big event, hopefully a big event, National Night Out. It is a national event and within the United States and Canada, bringing neighborhoods together with the police department, city council. We have hosted one in the past few years. We have not due to COVID, but in the past we always hosted the event in downtown Willow Glen. We may be having it at a park this year because we'd like to do a little bit of a bigger event. It's on Tuesday, August 3rd from, I believe it'll be around 5 to 8 p.m. And we hope everybody can attend, and we'll be sending out more information on that event throughout the summer. We're thinking of a lot of great things to do, and if you have any ideas or suggestions or want to volunteer, you can contact us at membership@wgna.net for your ideas or to volunteer. We're looking forward to it. We're also in the works on sponsoring 6 more art boxes, the utility boxes that you see on streets with artwork. There's 6 available in the Willow Glen area that don't have any artwork on it, and we're going to be sponsoring artists to paint on them. We have to do it through the city of San Jose, and it's a little bit of a time-consuming process. So it will happen sometime later this year, but we're working on it. And so if you ever wonder what your membership dues go for, this is one of the things that we spend dues on, along with National Night Out and other events like that. We also have the Downtown Willow Glen clock unveiling on May 25th, and I'm gonna turn it over to Brian Yee, who works for Republic Urban and has been helping us with this project, and he'll let you know more about what's going on this and when the building will be opening. And I apologize because at the beginning I forgot to introduce everybody, the most important thing. I'm Deanna Merzadagan, the president of Willow Glen Neighborhood Association. We have Kathleen Almaslino, who is the vice president. Can you say hi, Kathleen?
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here.
And Brian Yee, who will be speaking in a moment. We have Jose Salcido. Can you say hi to everybody, Brian?
He might be muted.
Oh, all right, that's all right. And we have Pierluigi Oliverio, our former city council person in District 6.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi, with Pierluigi.
And Maren Sederquist, she is also on our board, and I believe she's on this call. If I missed anybody,
hi everyone.
If I missed anybody, let me know. I can't see all the people who are on the call, so I don't know if there's any more board members on the call and I missed them. Okay, so Brian, can you give us an update on the clock?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Deanna. Really appreciate it. As you all may or may not know, this has been an amazing coordination with the Willow Glen Neighborhood Association and Republic Urban Properties on having this really iconic symbol for Willow Glen downtown in particular. Of course, just to give you some background, the Willow Glen Neighborhood Association basically fundraised the clock for the building, which is actually prominently displayed on the tower as we speak, and you probably can see it and drive by down Lincoln. So we're going to have an unveiling on the 25th, and this will be in call it coordination as well with Copita, the restaurant, who will be catering. So if you have a chance, feel free to stop by on the 25th at 11 a.m. It's going to be a wonderful event. Beyond that, too, as you'll see, there's some minor, call it public improvement work at the, that Republic has been doing too for the offsites. So beyond just the building itself, we made some improvements to the sidewalks. So we're expanding the sidewalks, as you've seen over by the table and by the corner by Lincoln and Willow.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So our first speakers are going to be with the Coalition of the Unhoused, and then our second speaker is John Carr. So I'm going to turn this over to Richard Scott, and can you introduce your members, and then Todd Langton, sorry, I'm not pronouncing your name correctly, will be giving the presentation.
Right. Well, as many of you know, Deanna, some time ago, did a survey and got 1,000 signatures to support having a portion of the fairground used to house unhoused people. We at the coalition also have recently done a survey, and we got over 1,000 signatures. I'm not sure. I've on this call from the coalition are Todd Langton, who will actually do the presentation, Virginia Becker, and who else is on there, Todd? I can't see my whole screen. Albert Becker, for sure, right. Some of you know that I have been involved in homeless things since the time I was in the Peace Corps a few years ago, like 1966. And you all, many of you are very kind and bring donations to me for the unhoused. Todd has been very good in getting all of this organized for us, and we're hoping to get support to use part of the fairgrounds. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everybody for having us. I want to talk a little bit about the origins of our group and this, maybe the second or third movement towards the fairgrounds. It was about 10 months ago. A lot of advocates, there was about 15 of us advocates, Richard and Virginia, Albert, myself, and some others that were meeting out at the Spring Street Columbus Park area. And our purpose for meeting was to talk about how we could be advocates for those who are going through the big sweep out there, the big abatements, the 3 phases. And as I was pulling in, as many of us were pulling in, there was fire engines and police there, and a big fire going on. And I had seen that many times before as I'd been out there. And so we just did a little detour, went around the block to get to where we were going, where we're having this meeting at an RV. And during our meeting, another fire broke out. And then at the end of the meeting, after about an hour and a half, a big fire broke out right next to our meeting. And it was added to it was a couple of big explosions. So fire engines, police everywhere. And I brought up the phrase, I said, geez, guys, if you can imagine, I said, is this just obvious? This is a humanitarian crisis tenfold. Not because of the fires necessarily, but because of the unhoused situation. But I said, if you can imagine I pointed toward the west, the Los Altos Hills. If you can imagine an earthquake or the big fires going on up there, and let's just say 200-300 homes got wiped out, where would be the first place our county would go to set up shelter? And it's obvious it would be the fairgrounds. And so we dove into this idea and did a lot of research on it, especially Virginia and some of the other members of our team, and did a lot of research on the fairgrounds. And you're going to see a culmination of our efforts here in the presentation. So when we say the fairgrounds, it's a little bit misleading by using the words fairgrounds, because we're really only asking for a very small portion of the fairgrounds. But as we all know, and these numbers are outdated, and we haven't updated our presentation with the new pit count that just got finished a month or so ago, a point in time count. But on the 2019 point in time count, there was 9,700 unhoused in Santa Clara County on any given day. But we have, how many shelter beds did we have on any given night? About 2,200. So that means roughly about 7,500 had no place to go other than the street, their tents, their tarps, their sleeping bags, and sometimes just nothing out there. This is shameful. This is a crisis. We believe that obviously it is a humanitarian crisis, and we should treat it as such. So our proposal is twofold. And you see that little green area, that's the 13 acres. So there's 80 acres that are barren right now at the fairgrounds, and they've been barren for about 20 years, we believe. And Virginia and a lot of us did a lot of research on this. Our Santa Clara Fairgrounds is one of the most underutilized fairgrounds in the entire state. The main source of revenue, when I heard about this, I was shocked. Main source of revenue is paintball, and most of it comes from online horse race gambling. There's actually a casino out there at our fairgrounds running almost every day of the week from sunup to sundown. What does that say about our county? But bottom line is we had 80 acres that's just sitting dormant out there. And if it is truly a humanitarian crisis, we should go to the fairgrounds and find some land that we could portion off to help our unhoused. And our proposal is twofold. One, safe parking, utilize 5 acres, 5 of the 13 acres that would provide about not housing, but places for 160 vehicles to park. On average, about 1 person per vehicle, so 160 people. And then the second part would be 8 acres. Now that would be for the pallet shelters. We'll get more into the pallet shelters here in a minute. And that would house about 240 pallet shelters with 1 person per pallet shelter. So altogether, 400 people, 400 of our neighbors, our friends and neighbors. I just want to highlight the friends and neighbors thing is, I don't know if you've heard the statistic, but about 80% of our unhoused are local. They're from here. They are truly our friends, our neighbors, and our relatives. So you see the PS and the SP. The SP, those are the 4 pods, 4 little communities of safe parking. And then you'd have 6 communities. So there'd be a total of 10 little communities within this 13 acres, 6 communities of the pallet shelters. And again, the safe parking would have 160 vehicles. The pallet shelters would have, there'd be 6 communities within the pallet shelter, 6 pods, but each community would have a caseworker, program assistant, staff, trailer for support, wash stations, all the showers, electricity, internet, dumpsters, security, and places to prepare the meals. Obviously, this is transitional housing. Let me back up a little bit. We believe there's 2 huge needs in Silicon Valley, and that is permanent housing, obviously, right? Not enough permanent housing, but there's not enough transitional housing also. There's far too many of our unhoused friends and neighbors that are dying way too soon, long before the life expectancy, because they're out there in the elements. They're not getting the shelter and their needs taken care of. So you may have seen the news lately about the plans for the fairgrounds. There's San Jose State wants to put a track and field out there in the fairgrounds. There's a cricket stadium that's proposed. The Earthquakes want to have their soccer stadium there. And we're saying, hey, bring it on. That's great. We need this. But we also need a small little red area up there at the 13 acres where we can all live together and make this work. A community of our unhoused friends and neighbors that could live in those pallet shelters and the safe parking RVs. And we believe this could work in harmony together. There's several situations across the country where they're living together in these venues, next to these venues, and it's working out just fine. Why the fairgrounds? Well, the land at the fairgrounds, it's owned by all of us. It's owned by the Santa Clara County, the citizens of Santa Clara County. Again, barren land is already there. There's fences, there's access to controlling the space. We're not impinging on some dense neighborhood housing. It's within walking distance of not only shopping centers, but bus lines, transportations, and banks and so forth. They've got a lot of facilities out there that could be used to help with the unhoused for this transitional housing, as we all know. But again, we're asking for 13 of the 80 barren acres. Our vision: 6 pallet shelter communities. Again, 6 with 10 people, 40 people in each of the 6 for the pallet shelters. We picture that they would customize it. The advocate groups would go out there and help them keep it clean, bring them resources and so forth to help them maybe customize their own little community. We would hope that the county, and again, the county is going to have the final say on this, and they would choose a big nonprofit to run it and several other nonprofits to service it. But we would hope that they would put a top priority on the best of our unhoused to go in and to live in these shelters for a period of about 6 months. And that's coming up here in just a minute, about 6 months to a year at the most. So questions you may be thinking, how long do we expect the residents to stay? We just talked about that. And this is a study that a lot of the big nonprofits, the transitional housing people promote, and that is about 6 months. That may not be long enough. Some of you may be aware that there's already a shelter community, pallet shelter community out called Esperanza in San Jose on 1st Street and Mission. I believe there's about 35 pallet shelters out there. I've got a friend, single mother, Vietnamese, has 3 children. She was told she was going to be there for 6 months. She's been there about a year and a half now. But if we stuck to this format, to this math on the 6-month stay, we'd have each resident would stay about 6 months. The next question there, how many residents would be at the fairground at one time? 400. That'd be 160 people in their safe parking, perhaps their RVs, their cars, 240 people in the pallet shelters. So annually, if it worked like the math said it would, and under the guidelines, that'd be about 800 people a year that would transition from field and the streets and their little tents, their encampments. They would transition into this village out at the fairgrounds and then transition out ideally into permanent housing. So our focus is on transitional housing. We hope that the city and the county will do a much better job on the permanent housing. And if we get everything working in unison, we can make this happen. What's it going to cost? Now, this is interesting. You could debate these numbers backwards and forwards. What we're finding when we make this presentation to like Otto Lee and the Board of Supervisors staff, what we're hearing again and again is money is not the issue. But let's address the financial part of it. And this was shocking to me. And I want to really thank Virginia Becker for diving into this and getting these details. Well, you'd have some startup costs. You need about $2.2 million for the pallet shelters themselves. You'll see more pictures of the pallet shelters here in a bit. $1.8 million for the solar power box. That's the same company that's doing the power out at Esperanza, the small little village out here in San Jose, First and Mission. About $5,400 for the setting up the showers and sinks. So what Total upfront cost about $4 million. What about ongoing cost? About $401,000 a month. You can see $197,000 for sanitation. You get the food, dumpsters, work trailers, and the servicing. Let me go back up to this page here. Just 1 second here. So the program facilities, the case managers, and so forth, but altogether about $401,000 per month. By the way, you look at the very bottom, says see master plan for details. We've got a very detailed, long master plan with all the specific details in the plan. So I like to use the phrase status quo. And I've said this numerous times, a lot of people, bottom line is the status quo, it isn't working. What Santa Clara County and San Jose, a lot of our cities in Santa Clara County have been doing the last 20 years, it isn't working. But what about the financial part of it? The status quo is, we're going to keep this number on the left-hand side. This is from a study done in 2014. This is a national number. We had a county number up there before, and we got a little bit of pushback. And so we said, what the heck, let's just use a national number that's clear back in 2014. So the average annual cost for an unhoused person in the United States in 2014 was $35,000. And what services did that encompass? You can see over on the right-hand side, healthcare, emergency room, mental, a lot of drug and mental health issues. What's interesting about this is that you notice that there's, on the right-hand side, there's no category for the sweeps, the abatements, the incarcerations, the fire department going out regularly, the legal fees and fines, crime, garbage, and so forth. It's mostly focused on inpatient, outpatient, emergency, mental, drug, and health use. We believe, and the studies will back this up, when people are in transition housing, their health gets much, much better, and their usage of the healthcare system goes down substantially. So the annual cost of the status quo, $28 million. That's what it's costing right now in Santa Clara County. At $28 million bucks. Excuse me, that's what it's costing nationally on a $35,000 per unhoused person. Multiplied times 800 would be $28 million. But again, this $35,000 is way too low, but we're gonna give it that just to focus on a number. If somebody wanted to debate the numbers, it's probably close to 60, 70,000 a year, especially in Santa Clara County, and fast forward from 2014 to 2022. But let's stay with 35,000 a year. So it's costing for 800 people a year about 28 million bucks. Our cost for our proposal for these 800 people would be $4.8 million a year. So that's a savings of at least $23 million a year. Break it down to a daily number. Daily cost of the status quo, 99 bucks a day. Daily cost per person for our proposal, for the meals, showers, electricity, dumpsters, toilets, caseworkers, security, all that, about $17 a day. We can finish, finesse these numbers either way. Bottom line, even if it was the same number on both sides, we need to take care of our unhoused friends and neighbors. They're human beings. They need our care. They need a place to transition so they can get into permanent housing and get their lives back on track. Summary: there's no better place than the fairgrounds. 80 acres of barren land. Santa Clara County is going to save a ton of money by doing this. 13 acres is all we're asking for, the 80 acres. Time to do it is now. Let me back up a little bit. This fairgrounds really, truly would be a sanctioned encampment. And we've heard the phrase sanctioned encampment a lot in discussions, the city council meetings, the board of supervisors meetings. Bottom line, this would be a glorified sanctioned encampment. We believe every district in the San Jose system, every council, every district should have a sanctioned encampment. And really every city in the Santa Clara County should have a sanctioned encampment. We would hope that this Santa Clara Fairgrounds model would be just that, a model for how to run it and be a hub for all the other sanctioned encampments. Sweeping the people, the main thing about sanctioned encampments, they don't get swept. Sweeping doesn't do anything good. It does a lot bad. It does give an opportunity to get those camps clean, but as soon as they finish the sweep, our unhoused are right back there and it turns into a mess again. Sanctioned encampments wouldn't be swept. They'd have caseworkers there. They would be living in a secure, safe place. Can you imagine tonight, when you go to, your head hits a pillow tonight, if you can imagine that you cannot lock your door. You can't lock the door, and to break into your home, all you need is just maybe a fingernail clippers to go through the canvas. How well would you sleep? And then when you went to work tomorrow, knowing that your home could not be secured and locked up, how well would you function at work? And this is a daily issue. This is what's going on with our unhoused. They need a safe, secure place where they can lock the door, take a shower, leave, go get their things done during the day. Ideally, they're going to job placements, job training, mental health, drug programs, and they're coming home to their community each night. So you can imagine it. We're all living together, we're making it happen, and we're not just coexisting, but we're a community where we're thriving and we're working together next door to each other to these special venues. We welcome those venues. We believe that the Santa Clara County needs them. But the most important thing we need right now in Santa Clara County is humanity and helping take care of our unhoused. So status quo. We don't have to look too far to see status quo. We all see it every day. This was a picture of the 101 off-ramp on Story Road. This is status quo. This is our proposal. We believe that this, as a template, as a model for all these other sanctioned encampments that should happen throughout the county, could put a big, huge dent into our unhoused crisis and get people back into the normal way of life, the healthy way of life, and get them functioning in our society.
Thank you, Todd. That was a very well-researched proposal and very informative. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I was going to cover some questions and some information in the chat. Pierluigi is letting us all know that the fairgrounds is 159 acres total. So what you're proposing is using less than 10% of the fairgrounds for this.
Excellent
correct?
point. Yes, indeed.
All right. And could you elaborate on what kind of services or help people would get for drugs and mental health?
There would be caseworkers in each pod, and each pod is about 40, on the pallet shelters, about 40 shelters and 40 people. And there would be a station there, one trailer there with caseworkers where they could receive the different help for the different charities that are out there, different nonprofits, but especially the county and the city health departments. So Virginia, you want to take that question a little bit further?
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to point out that we were very careful with the number. When we're saying we want to have 40 people in our communities, that's because we researched this and found if a community has more than 50 people in it, it starts to become unmanageable. With 40, you can manage it. And what we're saying, and sets our plan aside from other plans, is our staffing. It's not just going to be one manager for the pallet shelters. It's completely staffed in each of the pods. So each of the 10 pods, again, remember 4 pods for safe parking and 6 for the pallet shelters, will be completely staffed with people. The other thing is rules will be made and they will be followed and they will be established by the community. And if you break the rules, you leave. This is what we want to do is we want to make something that Santa Clara County will be proud of. This isn't meant to be a dumping ground for people who are not ready to transition into permanent housing. And right now we have hundreds of people on a list waiting for permanent housing that are working. 40 to 60% of our unhoused are working. So I don't know if that would be a criteria or not for staying there. But one of the definite criteria is you've got to be able to live within a community, so you can live within this 40-person community. And if you can't do that yet, then you're not quite ready for this program.
All right.
Good question.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question, which you pretty much answered, is that you are proposing that there is some kind of criteria for people to be admitted to this program.
Absolutely, definitely
Yes.
so.
We want this, I mean, honestly, we want this to be something that Santa Clara County can be proud of, that they can say, look what we're doing and it's working. And showers make a big difference. We're going to have showers at each of the communities. And I know that sounds so trite, but showers are the difference between looking and feeling your best, both within the community and outside of the community. So again, these will primarily be people that are working, that are trying to get to permanent housing, that have agreed to follow rules. Again, we're only offering 240 pallet shelters, and right now we have 9,000 unhoused people. So we can be particular and show how this works. The other thing I want to point out is right now our unhoused don't really have anything to work towards. You're either unhoused or you're housed, but there's nothing in the middle. You either have enough money for rent or you don't. And so this would give our unhoused people something to work for. I want to live there. I want to do that. How do I do that? How do I get in? And we want to see a model like this in every district. This is just, the fairgrounds happens to be in your district, which to us seems like the most logical spot because we already own the land. As Todd was saying, it's already fenced in. That's a major project right there. So we can monitor the comings and going. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, Deanna, you asked a little bit about like mental health and drug and alcohol services. Some of you may know that I was the supervisor in a county mental health homeless team when we had one that was especially pointed at dealing with the homeless. Each of us had a caseload of over 60. We made sure that they could get the drug and alcohol services. We had our own psychiatrist. And when we put people, my recollection, and maybe, have glossed over, but we started with a program in transitional housing in Sunnyvale that actually the recently former head of the Office of Supportive Housing was an intern in. The biggest problem in getting treatment, apart from people, drug and alcohol treatment is very difficult for people to get going. But we cannot find people. When there's housing available, often we can't find them to get them in the housing. We can't find them to get drug and alcohol treatment. We can't find them to take them to the doctor. So having sanctioned encampments, and especially a place like the fairgrounds, we will know where people are so we can provide the service and do it consistently. We will have a way to get people the services that aren't provided right there. But when you scatter people everywhere, one of the worst things about being swept all the time is the mental instability. Now, you all know, I mean, it's not a secret that we have a major methamphetamine crisis in this community. And part of that has to do with the fact that people are treated so poorly and are so unstable. Talking to meth addicts, I have some good friends who were long-term meth addicts. I said, nothing feels better than getting on meth till it doesn't feel better anymore. I know at my age, I'm 80, I have difficulty sleeping. If I were stuck in an encampment, you bet I'd use meth. Now, I've never done drugs in my life, but so the guy next to me, he looks like he's doing pretty good and having a nice time. Like, what the hell? Why not? So for people to get mental stability and get drug treatment, they have to be in a permanent place to do it. Thank you.
All right. One of the questions, I know you answered it in the chat, but children will not be allowed there, correct? And then it sounds like nobody would be forced to go there.
No. Of course not.
People would want to go there.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a big misconception that people don't want these things. We've had some pushback from the housing homeless industrial complex saying they looked at a survey in LA and people all chose they wanted permanent housing. Well, you offer me $10 or you offer me $1 million, I'm going to say I want the $1 million. But there's got to be a place in between. There's got to be a place where folks can go get stable and then feed into the permanent housing that's going to take a long time to build.
I got to interject here. We're taking this to the county supervisors, board of supervisors, and we're hoping that the county supervisor, the board of supervisors will say, yes, we want to do this. And then it's really out of our realm. A lot of these decisions will be made by the county and by the major nonprofits that will run the village. We would hope that they would make some good sound decisions. We will hold them accountable, put pressure on them to make the good decisions and not let this thing fail. This has got to be something of a beacon. It's going to be a template for how it should be done. I want to bring up, I put in the chat the palletShelter.com website and encourage all of you to go there and look for the village that's in Boston. By the way, there's about 70 of these across the nation now. Look for the village in Boston, the Pallet Shelter Village in Boston, and watch the video. It's only 4 minutes. It will wow you. It'll just solidify everything we just talked about and how we can really start to take care of our unhoused and get them into transitional housing that will lead to permanent housing.
You mentioned that you wanted to repeat this model throughout the districts in San Jose, but I know, we need it across all the cities in Santa Clara County.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And some of our cities in Santa Clara County are doing a much better job than some of the others. Yeah. San Jose is not up there on the top list of those cities that are doing a great job. Really, none of the cities are doing a great job, but some are doing a much better. We would hope it would start right here in San Jose, that they step up and be an example to the other cities of how to do it. This isn't something new, by the way. This is going on in several cities across the country.
I want to address the question about forcing people. In this country, we seem to have the belief somehow that if we make a law, then that's going to solve the problem. And that looks like you did something. You cannot force people to get mental health treatment. You cannot force them to get drug and alcohol treatment, no matter what you do. So I know that a number of our politicians are saying things like tough love, infantilizing the homeless, or that if they don't go, if they don't use it, they're service resistant. There's that talk. Well, you can't resist something that doesn't exist. You can't resist something that doesn't exist. So those are straw men. That's not the problem.
Pierluigi, I see you have some comments. Do you want to raise these comments to everybody?
No, I think we're fine. I think they've done a good job, identifying the property. It's owned by the county. The county is the only local government entity responsible for social welfare, which includes the homeless. And it's clearly public land that could be used within 24 hours if the board of supervisors would do so. So it's really an opportunity, as the permanent housing takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
It takes decades. So what are you going to do in the interim? And, right now the county has recently funded, as of the last auditor report last year, developments as high as $878,000 a unit. So, I think the advocates make a strong point. Thank you.
Thank you, Pierre. Can I address one other issue? I think there was a miscommunication about who would be coming into these shelters. Heck yes, we would have families welcome. We would hopefully have 1 or 2 pods that would be focused on perhaps single parents and those who have children. Absolutely. And then those who have pets. So again, but that decision is not going to be made by us. It's going to be made by the county and the people that run the program. This Esperanza is designed for strictly families. And there's lots of children out there. I encourage all of you to go out there and visit. But yes, we're going to take care of we want this to help take care of those families. And there's a lot of families out there, family units.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? I think that we covered most everything in the chat group. We really appreciate the presentation, and to me, it sounds like a great idea and well worth the cost too. I mean, I was very impressed that you guys included the cost aspect of it, because people are always wondering, and all of this, you know, costs money. And so including the costs, we really appreciate that also. Yes.
Deanna, could I just say one more thing? The only way this is going to happen is if our communities get together and ask our politicians to do the right thing. If they don't do it, and we've had this problem for years that folks speak out of, you know, they say, oh, we're for it, and then something comes up and they vote against it. We've got to make sure that they understand that we need this. Thanks.
We'd love to have all of you join our coalition. Join us. Let's make this happen.
Can we count on your support?
So what would you like residents to do, right? This Board of Supervisors, what action can they take to support this?
A big action right off the bat is if the Willow Glen Association endorsed this as a whole, that would have a lot of clout in the big picture, but there's other ways. Of course, writing to Congress members and council members is a great idea, but the endorsement from your neighborhood association would help a lot.
Very much so, yes.
We would have to talk about it in a board meeting and vote on it.
All right.
And you know, I have brought this to the Board of Supervisors previously.
Right.
Yeah, so I think if we can get more of the residents throughout the county to help with this, we may have more success.
Right. And that's what we plan on doing. We're going to be going to neighborhood meeting after neighborhood meeting, trying to get enough oomph that we can show the supervisors, look, all these neighborhoods are saying they support this idea. And they had said to us, we need to see that the neighborhoods support it. So that's the way that we can get this accomplished.
Things are changing. We have like 12 to 14 sites called SOAR sites now. The city council refused to endorse sanctioned encampments, but these SOAR sites, because they refused to endorse sanctioned encampments because we're always the lawyers are worried about the liability. But we have 14 sites now that have dumpsters, hand washing stations, and they have so much as promised us they will not sweep. So we have an opportunity to build residents there. Those places are getting trash pickup twice a week, and when there's a necessity to do what they call an escalated sweep, escalated cleanup, which means they just go pick up the trash. They're not supposed to destroy shelters now. Unfortunately, we do have problems with some of the entities that go out to do cleanup, and that's certainly not all of them, but who steal the homeless people's tools, take them, for themselves, actually go into the shelters and take them. We've had that very recently, but things are changing. I think our politicians are beginning to understand that the need is there and we can do something about it. Thank you all so much for listening to us, and we hope for your support.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker is former lieutenant with the San Jose Police Department, John Carr, and he has a presentation on using, on the potential closing of Reid Hillview Airport. John, are you with us? Are you on mute? Well, Brian.
Yeah, it's Mary's.
Deanna, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, John is attempting to unmute his iPad.
Okay. All right, great, thank you. And Brian, can you get ready for the video that he has?
Sure. Is this coming from Mary's iPad? Yeah.
Deanna, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you.
You got some echo. Mary probably needs to turn off of her, put her on mute.
I'm sorry, I couldn't quite hear that. Say it again,
Okay,
please.
now it's good. We were having echo before. So
Let me turn up the volume here.
okay.
Can you hear me now?
Well, we can hear you. There's a lot of background noise there.
I'm gonna shut that down.
Can you turn me up?
Excuse me.
How about now?
All right, that's much better.
Okay, great. Good evening, all. My name is John Carr, and I do have a history with the San Jose Police Department, but I'm also a member of the Santa Clara County Airports Commission, and I am a former air traffic controller as well. And it's been, I've been on the commission since 2017, and tonight it's my pleasure to introduce the presenter, Stephen McHenry. Stephen McHenry is currently the president of the San Martin Neighborhood Alliance, which is also a community organization like you at Willow Glen. Prior to his recent retirement, he was the senior vice president of engineering at Symantec, where he created the first ever cloud platform. Prior to working at Symantec, he was the director of security engineering at Google. Before that, he was the chief architect for Netflix's initial electronic delivery system, which we all know as the movies over the internet. He also served as vice president of engineering for MSC's semiconductor management software and has held engineering and management positions at MSI Data, Rockwell, and Chevron. Steve received his undergraduate degree in physics and geology from Chapman College and his master's degree in computer science from the University of California at Irvine. And at the conclusion of this presentation, I will be available to answer any questions you may have. So Deanna, I leave it to you for the presentation.
Oh, that's me.
Thank you. I had to get unmuted. All right, thank you. Brian, can you start the presentation, please?
Sure thing. Hold on, give me a minute.
Good evening and welcome to the San Martin Neighborhood Alliance presentation about the Reid Hillview Airport, the lead study done by Santa Clara County, unleaded aviation fuel, and possible airport closure. These are the topics we're going to be looking at tonight. There are two issues facing Reid Hillview. We'll look at what those are, some additional facts about the Zeron lead study, and then a number of different lead studies that were done about Reid Hillview Airport. First, let's look at Reid Hillview, which is facing two issues. The first issue facing Reid Hillview Airport is that the lead study detected slightly elevated levels of lead in children. This is not a crisis. The fastest way to solve this problem is by transition to unleaded fuel. And after January 1st of this year, only 9
You just start over.
Sorry, everybody. We seem to be having some technical difficulty. Seems like we lost sound on this video. Brian, do you, can you hear the video on yours?
Is it? Yeah, I can hear it on my side. It's not working.
Yeah, it's not working for anybody else.
Oh, that's strange. I'm playing
It did
now.
at the beginning.
Study
Could you got the beginning portion?
Yeah, it did at the beginning and then the sound went away.
Oh,
may have been inaccurate. It relies on one major assumption.
does that work?
There we go. Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay, it might be because I was muted. All right.
Okay, so can you back it up?
Yeah, sure. I'll here.
Yeah, there. That's
Okay.
where we lost sound.
Sure. Okay.
That requires input from multiple
There you
groups,
go.
which has not happened. Only local residents have had input. And the lead issue is being grossly inflated to create a health crisis to drive a land use issue and close Reid Hillview Airport. Let's look at some facts about the lead study. The lead study was commissioned to the Mountain Data Group led by Dr. Sami Zaran, who had previously published a report on lead surrounding Michigan airports and was highly critical. They paid $250,000 for the study and $90,000 for subsequent peer reviews, some of which were ignored. We'll get to that in a minute. The study was a statistical analysis of approximately 17,000 blood level tests from children taken in the time frame 2011 to 2020. This came from a California Department of Public Health data set. As part of the study, no blood samples were collected and analyzed, no measurements of airborne lead were taken, and only previously taken blood samples were analyzed. The study only presents predicted levels around the airport. No verification of these predicted levels was done. And there is negative corroboration from other independent lead studies. We'll talk about those in a few minutes. Now, why the whole study may have been inaccurate. It relies on one major assumption, and that's that the measurements taken were accurate. Many blood level analyzers were developed in the 1990s when blood levels were much higher, in the 10 to 50 range. Below 10 micrograms per deciliter, they are not accurate. They are only certified down to 3 micrograms per deciliter with an accuracy of plus minus 4 micrograms per deciliter. And this study attempts to draw conclusions based on readings of 1.9 versus 2.1 micrograms per deciliter, which is a difference of 0.2. And I will add that 3 different and widely used blood level analyzers were recently recalled for giving erroneous results. Now, there's also an issue about the center of the lead study. The center of the study was the northwest corner of the airport, and the half-mile ring, which we'll look at in a few minutes, is denoted by the red circle. Most people agree that the center of the lead study should have been the run-up area, and the half-mile ring then would have been the green line. Now, let's look at blood lead levels. The airport opponents quote the CDC, there is no safe level of lead in the blood. So let's look at what is safe. Safe means free from harm or risk. Are playgrounds safe? No, kids fall and get hurt every day. Are school buses safe? No, kids are injured and occasionally die in school bus accidents. Are shopping malls safe? No, active shooters have killed kids in shopping malls, sadly. Are schools safe? No, active shooters have killed scores of kids in schools, again, tragically. Are cars safe? No, kids are injured and die every day in automobile accidents. There is no such thing as completely safe, anywhere. Now let's look at the CDC recommendations for blood levels in children. The y-axis of this graph goes from 0 to 55 micrograms per deciliter of blood level. And the CDC reference level during the study was reduced from 5 micrograms per deciliter to 3.5 micrograms per deciliter in July of 2021. The CDPH uses a value of 4.5 micrograms per deciliter. It was more stringent than the CDC until the CDC reduced it. So let's look at what the different CDC levels are. Under 3.5 micrograms per deciliter, their new reference level, they give anticipatory guidance about some common sources of lead exposure and how to prevent that, routine assessment of nutritional and developmental milestones, follow-up blood level monitoring at recommended intervals, and no case is open to track the child, and this is not considered elevated. The next level, 3.5 to 19 micrograms per deciliter, you follow all the previous recommendations, but now you report the test result to the state or local health department. A case is open to track the child because now the child needs to be examined for environmental exposure history, for sources of lead. You want to do environmental investigation of the home, test for iron sufficiency per the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines, nutritional counseling, supportive services, and follow-up blood level monitoring at recommended intervals. And for 3.5 to 10 micrograms, that's 6 to 9 months. 10 to 19 is more severe, so you do it more often, 3 to 6 months. Now let's look at the 20 to 44 micrograms per deciliter range. This is all the previous ones, but now you collect a complete patient history and a physical exam looking for signs and symptoms related to lead. You perform an environmental investigation of the home and lead hazard reduction. You consider obtaining an abdominal x-ray to look for lead-based paint chips and other things in the intestines. And the reason for that is most elevated blood levels are because lead is ingested via the mouth. Kids play in the dirt or paint chips or whatever, and they stick their hands in their mouth and it goes into the intestines. And consider contacting a pediatric environmental health specialty unit or poison control center for guidance. Now let's look at greater than 45 micrograms per deciliter. You do everything you did for the other levels, but now you do a complete history and physical exam with a detailed neurological exam. You must do an abdominal x-ray and initiate bowel decontamination if indicated. You must contact a pediatric environmental health specialty unit or poison control center, and you admit the patient to the hospital if you're considering chelation therapy or they exhibit signs or symptoms of lead poisoning, and if a safe lead environment at the home cannot be assured. Now, let's look at the children's blood levels around Reid Hillview Airport. Were they in the greater than 45 range? No. Were they in the 20 to 45 range? No. Were they in the 3.5 to 20 range? No. The blood levels of the children around Reid Hillview Airport were under 3.5 micrograms per deciliter. Now let's look at blood levels for children today nationally. This is a study done by the National Institute of Health, and the majority of children studied in the US have blood levels in the 1.0 to 2.5 range, the same as those studied near Reid Hillview Airport. In fact, 55% of the children have blood levels in the 1.0 to 2.5 range. Here are the blood levels of the children surrounding Reid Hillview Airport. There are actually 2 lines there, but it's very hard to see because of the scale of the graph. So we're going to expand this part on the next slide. On this chart, we see the range on the y-axis from 0 to 4 micrograms per deciliter. Now, let me explain what the x-axis is here. So on the right side, that would be if 100% of the airplanes are using leaded fuel. And at the left, it would be if 0% of the airplanes were using leaded fuel. Or, put another way, on the right side, it would be if there was 100% of the traffic at Reid Hillview Airport, and at the left side, if all traffic was stopped. Either way, the effect is the same from stopping traffic or simply switching traffic to unleaded fuel. The blue line, which is a little steeper, represents blood lead levels within a half a mile of the airport, and the green line represents blood lead levels over a half a mile from the airport. Now, keep in mind that the minimum accuracy for blood lead level analyzers is 3. And also keep in mind that 55% of the children in the nation are in this range. So even with 0 airplane traffic, notice that the kids still have measurable lead in their blood, which does not come from airplane lead. Now, we're going to expand this on the next slide because the neighbors around the airport and in the presentation of the lead study were not shown the graph you see here. They were shown this graph, which makes it look a lot more dramatic with the reduction of the lead in the environment. But notice the base of this graph is not 0, it's 1.4. And this makes it look a lot more dramatic. Also, the y-axis has been expanded so that the slopes of the lines are much more dramatic. So where does the other lead come from if you eliminate all the lead in aviation fuel and you still have 1.6 micrograms per deciliter in children's blood? We'll look at that in a minute. A peer review of the lead study, Dr. Mark Cullen, who's a Stanford professor of medicine, epidemiology, and biomedical data science, said, this finding is not a health crisis, but his opinion was summarily ignored by the county of Santa Clara. Now, where does that other lead come from? It comes from paint, dust, and chips. It comes from plumbing, disturbed soil that was previously contaminated from auto gas, imported ceramics, cans, spices, jewelry, some home remedies, and some eye cosmetics. If you look at the lead-based paint in housing before 1940, 87% of the houses had lead-based paint. Between 1940 and 1959, 69% did, and from 1960 to 1978, when lead-based paint was outlawed, you had 24%. Overall, 40% of housing has lead-based paint in some form. Now let's cross-check the CDC's recommendations with the California Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention Program. Greater than 20 micrograms per deciliter, a joint home visit is made by a public health nurse and registered environmental health specialist. 15 to 19 micrograms, only a home visit by a public health nurse, and 10 to 14, telephone notification and/or a home visit. Under 10 micrograms per deciliter, there is no recommendation for any follow-up. 10 to 14 is the lowest level for intervention. Now let's look at blood lead levels in the past. This is a chart of average blood lead level in micrograms per deciliter from 1976 to 1980 as lead was being removed from paint and automotive fuel. The average was 15, and the 95th percentile was 29. So if you think about it, with the average is 15, that means half the population had higher blood lead levels than 15 in this time frame. So if you were born before 1976, the average blood lead level when you were a child under 5 was 15 micrograms per deciliter. Half the population, as I said, had blood lead levels higher than that. Now I'm going to ask a rhetorical question. Do half the persons 46 and older that you know exhibit signs of brain damage? Let's look at this another way. This is the percentage of children that have blood lead levels over 4.5 by county in the state of California. And this is a CDPH study, which is why 4.5 is used and not 3.5. You see Santa Clara sits approximately in the middle. It's about the median for the state. Let's look at other counties in the San Francisco Bay Area. Santa Cruz County has higher blood levels. Here's San Francisco. Here's Monterey. Here's Marin. And this is San Mateo. Only San Mateo has slightly lower percentage of children with elevated blood lead levels than Santa Clara County. So is this an urgent health crisis that demands immediate emergency response? No. But the neighbors were misled. Let me show you how. I will show you the misleading graphs. In this slide, we see that the accurate graph is on the left, but what the neighbors were shown is on the right, and it looks much more dramatic. This is what I call the Jedi mind trick of data presentation. We're going to look at some more examples of this throughout the lead study. Here is an accurate graph of blood lead levels versus distance from the airport. On the left is under half a mile, in the middle is a half a mile to a mile, and on the right is a mile to a mile and a half. This is the accurate representation, and you'll notice there really is not that much difference between the three graphs. It's slightly higher for under a half a mile. But the base of this graph is 0. Now I'm going to expand this section on the next slide and show you what the neighbors were shown. The neighbors were shown a graph that looks like this. Note the base of this graph is 1.5, and it makes it look much more dramatic, the difference between a half a mile and over a half a mile. This is the accurate graph for blood lead levels versus residential near angle, which is sort of a fancy way of saying, do you live north, east, south, or west of the airport? And you'll notice the results here show that east, it's slightly elevated from north, south, or west. And this is the result that is negatively corroborated with other lead studies. We will get to those in a few minutes. Note the base of this graph is 0. And we are expanding this on the next slide to show you what the neighbors were shown. The neighbors were shown a graph that looks like this, which makes it look much more dramatic that people on the east are exposed to way more than people north, south, or west. But the base of this graph is 1.4, not 0. And this makes it look far worse for people that live east. Here's a graph, the accurate graph for blood lead levels versus contraction. Now, what is contraction? Contraction, we actually had the opportunity from March of 2020 to about September of 2020 to observe what happens when virtually all airplane traffic stopped at Reid Hillview Airport due to the pandemic. So on the left side is the non-contraction period, which would be 100% of 2019 traffic levels. And the right side is when there was no airplane traffic at Reid Hillview at all. Note there is some difference in these graphs, but the base of these graphs is 0. Now I'm going to expand this part on the next slide and show you what the neighbors were shown. The neighbors were shown a graph that looks like this, but the base here, notice, is 1.5, not 0. And it makes it look much more dramatic, the contraction versus non-contraction phase. Now let's look at other lead studies in Santa Clara County. This is a study done by the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and it was a rolling 3-month lead average from 2016 to 2020. The EPA limit is shown as the red line. The blue line are the individual measurements, and the green line is the average lead, which you can see is decreasing over time and does not approach the EPA limit. Some key messages here. Only 5 days in 4.5 years ever exceeded the National Ambient Air Quality Standard lead limit. No day exceeded it over the last 2 years of testing, and the daily and 3-month rolling averages are roughly 1/3 of the EPA limit. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District petitioned the EPA to discontinue the lead monitoring due to low measured levels. And note, this happened while Cindy Chavez was chairperson of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, yet she claims she has no knowledge of either the monitoring, the low measured levels, or the petitioning to discontinue the monitoring. Lead levels outside of Reid Hillview will be exponentially lower than at the airport meter, which was near the run-up area. And the run-up area is the highest place of airborne lead on the airport. And lead levels rapidly decrease over distance. Now let's look at other lead studies in Santa Clara County. This is a lead study done by the Santa Clara County Office of Education. These are zip codes which had the dark orange zip codes had 2.5% or more of their children with blood lead levels over 4.5 micrograms per deciliter. And the lighter orange had 0 to 2.5% over 4.5 micrograms per deciliter. Now I've expanded the area around Reid Hillview Airport and shown the prevailing wind. Now, based on the prevailing wind, you would expect if it was airborne lead that was contaminating the children, that it would be areas to the south and east of the airport that had elevated lead levels. But you can see that the worst lead levels are actually to the west and north of the airport, which if it was airborne lead that was creating the problem, it would be to the south and east. So the source creating the lead contamination must be from another source. These are the zip codes from the study. The red ones are where 2.5% of the children and up had over 4.5 micrograms per deciliter. And the green is where there was 0 to 2.5% of the children had elevated blood lead levels. And these are the 4 zip codes surrounding Reid Hillview Airport. Let's look at where those are. So this is the worst zip code, and you can see it is directly north of the airport. The prevailing wind would take airborne lead and blow it away from this zip code. And note the half-mile circle in red is not exactly positioned around the blue pin because the blue pin is not at the center of the lead study. Let's look at the next zip code. The second worst zip code is predominantly to the west of the airport, with a little bit of it being to the south and southeast. Again, the prevailing wind would blow it mostly away from this zip code if it was aviation lead that was creating the problem. The third worst is actually doesn't touch the airport at all. It's northwest of the airport. And again, the wind would blow it in a direction away from this zip code. The least worst is the one where you would expect to find the most contamination if it was due to aviation lead. Now the question is, these 5 zip codes that are worse than the worst Reid Hillview zip code, why isn't the county putting at least as much effort into these 5 zip codes as the ones around Reid Hillview? Well, the answer is because lead isn't the issue. It's just an excuse to close the airport. Let's look at another lead study, this one done by the Department of Environmental Health. This was a presentation to the Santa Clara County Fire Chiefs from the Department of Environmental Health. These are the zip codes in Santa Clara County and their prospective levels of elevated lead. I've expanded the area around Reid Hillview Airport, and again, from the prevailing wind, you would expect it to be south and east of the airport if aviation lead was the problem, but the most problematic zip codes are to the west and northwest. Now let's look at a lead-based paint lawsuit. There was a lawsuit filed by Santa Clara County and other municipalities, and they sued lead-based paint manufacturers for identification and remediation of lead-based paint in Santa Clara County homes. They were awarded $409 million, which was split with those other municipalities in September of 2018. After 4 years, any unspent money is returned to the defendants. And Santa Clara County hasn't spent one dime of that money yet. If lead is such an issue, why not? Now, a late-breaking update, they now have a new plan to spend $16 million for lead-based paint remediation, almost 4 years after the judgment was handed down. In a Mothers Out Front Zoom meeting on May 14th, Cindy Chavez was asked, if all lead was removed from the fuel and environment at Reid Hillview Airport, would you still be in favor of closing it? Her response, yes, probably. So it's not about the lead. A health crisis is being created to fast track a land use issue that should have much broader community participation. And the fastest way to solve the health issue is to transition to unleaded fuel. Now let's look at today. A recent study, fall of 2021, showed that 80% of the flight operations at Reid Hillview could use 94 unleaded. As of January 1st, only unleaded fuel can be sold at Reid Hillview Airport. Let's look at what that means. We have removed 80% of the lead from the operations at Reid Hillview Airport, which means we've essentially moved the lead in the environment from here to here, which means it is no worse to be close to the airport than far away from the airport. Currently, lead is only 11%, lead from the airport is only 11% of the lead in the environment. 89% of the lead comes from other sources: paint, pipes and plumbing, soil, cans, pottery, candy, all the things you see on the right. And in 4 years, when we have 100% unleaded fuel, there will be 0% lead from the airport, and 100% of the lead will be coming from other sources. Now, Cindy Chavez says closing Reid Hillview is about removing lead from the environment, but 80% of the lead is gone, and the rest is gone in 2 to 4 years, long before 2031, when the airport could close. So it's not about the lead. Lead is just an excuse to close the airport. So don't fall for the politician stories. Keep Reid Hillview open. Thank you. And I encourage you to go to the URL shown, because there is a much more detailed presentation at that URL.
All right, thank you. Now we will ask some questions from the audience. I want to note that Janice Rombeck, she put a link to the Santa Clara County study in the chat. So if anybody wants to look at the Santa Clara County study, it's the link is in the chat. So we had some questions from the audience about if other areas of San Jose were compared to the area of Reid Hillview Airport, which it appears you have that data in that it was detailed by zip code. So I think that one was answered. This question was asked earlier in the presentation. Let's see. Do major airlines at Mineta use unleaded fuel? My understanding they're currently using leaded, but they're supposed to switch to unleaded. Do you know the answer to that, John?
Well, what jets use is what they call jet propellant, JP. And that is an unleaded fuel, as opposed to what the 100 low lead or the 94 unleaded, but it's not the same fuel mixture, no.
Okay, so within the presentation, it said something about that within 4 years, they should switch to unleaded fuel. Is that correct? What is that saying?
Well, the goal is right now, 94 unleaded is used by smaller general aviation aircraft because they're not high performance aircraft, you know, turbocharged aircraft, et cetera, et cetera. There are still aircraft that need the 100 low lead in order to operate proficiently for the engines. But what they're doing now is they're developing 100 no lead unleaded for the high performance aircraft as well. And basically the industry is catching up with the requirement and the desire to go to unleaded fuel completely, just like we did with automotive gasoline.
Okay. So the presentation mentioned that, manipulated statistics were presented to the residents and to the public. Who presented those statistics and how was it presented for those of us not that familiar with this?
Well, if I can refer to Mark Twain, who said lies, damn lies, and statistics. When this study came out, it was originally due in May of last year. And when it came out, we at the Airport Commission asked to review it and were not allowed to review it. They told us that we had to wait until the public got to see it. But at the same time, we are tasked with weighing in on these reports and advising the board. So this thing was delayed from May of last year to August. And when it came out in August, it obviously had been dealt with, I'll say, at the county, and I would offer at a political level in terms of how they wanted to present the data. And as Stephen points out, the accuracy of the graphs and the data was manipulated to represent a more sinister presentation. At the same time, I would add that the whole argument from the political side, and Cindy Chavez, is that Reid Hillview is the primary and most sinister cause of blood lead levels in children around the airport. And that is just not factually true. And as the Stanford professor pointed out, this is not a crisis. We have had a lead monitoring there at First Street and Jackson in San Jose as well. And that monitor there has been consistent with the same monitor that they have at the airport at Reid Hillview. And that monitor is at the what they call the run-up area, where airplanes are about ready to take off, run up their engines, make sure they're forming properly and functioning just before they take off. So the biggest source of generation of lead exhaust would come from the run-up area. And when you go 50 meters away from the airport, it totally dissipates and you can't even tell. And the EPA has told us this, Bay Area Air Quality Management District. Once it leaves 50 meters from the airport, you can't tell the source of the lead. So the bottom line is Reid Hillview is not the primary source of airborne lead and is not the sinister source of lead. You have pesticides that have been used in this valley for generations. You have a San Jose Raceway that was there for 27 years. And they currently have, I believe, it's the Katie Smith School that's literally built on that site, which has what they call legacy lead meaning that based on the amount of lead that was deposited into the soil and keeps re-emerging because of transfer and traffic and use, it keeps coming back up. At the same time, anytime you have agriculture, you plow up the earth, there's natural lead there as well. You have recycling. You have even the computer industry, you know, as they use all this lead solder and all those fumes that people inhale when they put these components together. So there's a variety of sources for lead and airborne lead in the area here. But Reid Hillview is the least of these sources of lead, and it is not at all as sinister as the politicians would believe. And the discussion always around closing Reid Hillview is that we could use that land for other purposes, and they even did a survey and spent taxpayer money to do a survey to repurpose the land. But what they fail to realize is that Reid Hillview Airport, as San Martin Airport, is a strategic asset that's critical to the infrastructure here in the Bay region, not just the Bay Area, but the Bay region. In 1994, the San Jose City Council, approved a measure to keep Reid Hillview open because as a reliever airport, and that's what Reid Hillview is, it's been designated as a reliever airport, as is San Martin. It keeps the general aviation aircraft away from the commercial airports such as San Jose, such as Oakland, San Francisco, et cetera, because you cannot commingle general aviation aircraft on a heavy basis with commercial aviation. It would be like putting a go-kart on a freeway and expecting you to still be able to move rapidly. Airlines can't handle that because there is no return on their investment, because if they can only get 30, 40 commercial flights in a day instead of the 80, 90 to 120 a day, then there's no ROI for them. So Reid Hillview and San Martin are critical to the operation and the commercial success of the Bay Area as well. And as we saw last summer with the CZU and the SCU fires, they too provide a base of operation for the fire response that we needed to put out those fires. And I guarantee you, had Reid Hillview not been available, the Evergreen area would have been gone in 2 hours. And we made that point in several articles back then. So it's not just about repurposing land, because some people have a lot of airplanes that they want to do and use and go golf with. It's a strategic asset. It's critical to the infrastructure and to the success of this Bay region. At the same time, they have a aviation program there, and a little bit of history there. Jason Dahl, who Flight 93 pilot, he was trained at San Jose State. And the university continues to have an aviation program there. We're short of pilots today. At the same time, we have the Mercy flights there, where people that are in medical need of evacuation or brought in for medical reasons in and out, we have pilots that volunteer to do that. So it is quite the strategic asset I would offer for not just San Jose, but for the Bay Area region.
Thank you. Just one more question. What is the status of the airport, and are there any supervisors willing to take on your cause, or at least open to listen to your presentation?
Thank you for the loaded question. Just kidding. The status right now is Reid Hillview is slated to remain open by agreement with the FAA until 2031. And the agreement is what is called an airport grant funding. Whenever the FAA grants money to an airport to improve itself on a capital improvement level, there's usually an agreement that the airport will remain in operation for at least 20 years. The last time we had an airport improvement plan grant agreement was 2011, which is where the 2031 figure comes from. And of course, the reason obviously is that the FAA wants a return on their investment as well. The whole notion of lead, in my personal opinion, and I would offer shared by others, is that this is a manufacturing crisis where they're elevating form over substance. In that, as Steve pointed out, this is not a lead crisis. This is where somebody wants to get a hold of that land for the purpose of development. But interestingly enough, no one has really committed, no one on the board is committed to what that land would be used for. They talk of affordable housing, but at the same time, they also realize that developers can also buy their way out of certain commitments to buy so many or to build so many affordable houses. They can pay off, the affordable housing requirement and then build more expensive housing at the sake of affordability. The politicians, Joe Simidian and Supervisor Mike Wasserman have supported the airport. They're the two that have supported the airport. Of course, Cindy Chavez, who, interestingly enough, in the last endorsement by the Mercury News, pointed out that Cindy Chavez isn't pro-labor, she is labor. And that's their quote, not mine. But the fact is 180 acres of usable land right now is pretty valuable. And if that can be turned over, then of course that translates into, political money going into certain politicians. But again, they're creating a crisis here that really isn't there. And so in terms of the status, the FAA totally has opposed the closure of Reid Hillview. At the same time, I would offer that, in 2017, when I came on the airport commission, the challenge at the time was to update the business plan. And one of the precepts that we conducted the business plan with was the notion that the airport would be self-sustaining, and has been. The airport has always sustained itself. It hasn't relied on the general fund because of airport tie-down fees, because of the fueling fees, because of the fixed base operators that work there and charge, et cetera. So the airport has always been able to maintain itself. And then suddenly, without the benefit of FAA funding to maintain the airport, now the taxpayers are going to have to start paying for the upkeep and maintenance of the airport itself. Now, whether you have one airplane that lands there or 101 airplanes that land there, if there's no FAA funding to support and augment the ability to maintain itself, it's coming out of the taxpayers' general fund. And that's the frustration, is that the airport has always been able to maintain itself. It hasn't cost the taxpayers. But with this notion that they're not going to accept any further FAA funding in order to take over in quote 2031, and with this latest, I'll call it ploy to create a lead crisis and close it sooner, that you're still talking about the taxpayers paying for something they shouldn't have to.
Thank you. We are running out of time, and so we're going to have to do a closing. I have a couple of more things before that. There is just more of a comment. If there's lead danger there, why would you build houses on it, that land? Then also, what can residents do to help prevent the closure of Reid Hillview Airport?
Well, the first thing they can do is get a hold of the Board of Supervisors and petition them and make it known that they don't want it closed, because it is, as I point out, a strategic asset. And if lead was such an issue, they've known about this, problem of lead, such as it is, forever, but now it became the topic du jour in order to, make the closure argument. But the best thing that the citizens can do is to petition their supervisor and say, we don't want it closed because it is a strategic asset. And, once it's gone, it's gone. You can't reclaim that kind of property.
All right. Thank you. On our website, www.gna.net, we have a section that has the email address of our area county supervisor, Susan Ellenberg. But you can also Google all the Board of Supervisors and get their email address if you're interested in sending an email to the Board of Supervisors. The Willow Glen area, Susan Ellenberg is our supervisor. Well, we really appreciate you being with us tonight, and it was a very informative and very technical presentation, a lot for us to learn and think about. So we really appreciate it. And we hope that everybody will attend our National Neighborhood Night Out on August 3rd and keep up to date of all our membership meeting events on our website and also on Facebook. And if you're not a member, please become a member. It's not very expensive, $30, $35. You can join on our website, www.wgna.net. Those dues are used to beautify our neighborhood. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.